Now, Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall Camilla have arrived in the Rwandan capital, Kigali. They'll be attending the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, CHOGM. South Africa is going to be represented by International Relations and Cooperation Minister Naledi Pandor. The meeting will discuss extremism and climate change. At least 40 heads of state and government from Africa, Europe, Asia and the Americas and the Caribbean and the Pacific will convene in Rwanda. Preceded by several forums, the official opening of CHOGM 2022 takes place on June the 24th, followed by the main high-level meeting of heads of government on Friday and Saturday. Meanwhile, the heir to the British throne arrived amid controversy over the United Kingdom's scheme to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says that the deal will break up people-smuggling networks. Well, to talk to us a little bit more about this Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, we're now joined in studio by somebody who's been following the international stories for us quite a bit, Khayelihle Khumalo. Kay, thanks very much indeed for joining us. It's been a while that CHOGM has not been able to meet because of COVID-19. So I guess there's a lot of anticipation on this gathering, and also the first time for the royals in Rwanda. The Queen's never been there.
Well, that's right, Peter. So quite a lot really to be discussed by the leaders. In fact, the Duchess of Cornwall alongside Prince Charles, they went to that very notorious site where, you know, over quite a number of Rwandans who died in a genocide, where quite a number of bones are kept. So they went to that facility to really reconnect with the country. So really on the sidelines, a lot of issues really already have been spoken about around the issue of terrorism and how CHOGM and how Commonwealth itself really can craft the blends that can be useful. We know that it is quite a major challenge in so many countries, but also something that is really fascinating, Peter, is around this particular proposal around the establishment of a World Environment Forum, really to look at the issues around the environmental loss in so many countries within the Commonwealth, because, I mean, 54 countries, a lot of them are small state countries, really vulnerable to climate change. So they really do know the devastation around this particular impact.
So the average age of an African is 19, which means there's a lot of people who probably are figuring, what on earth is this CHOGM? What on earth is the Commonwealth? Is this a gathering of former colonial brothers and sisters? What is CHOGM and why is it being given so much importance?
So it is a very central instrument, Peter, where obviously predominantly former British colonies came together and said, we're still willing to be together to look at so many commonalities around rule of law, democracy, the respect of human rights, the mutual respect, the issues of trade, among others. So these, as much as you do have some countries really that are non-former British colonies who really love the concept, who said, hold on, we're also quite keen to be part of this family. But in essence, it's all about really making sure that they sustain this political formation, but also in terms of the membership, it's voluntary. You'll remember that at some point, a country like Gambia, when Yahya Jammeh was still at the helm in that West African country, he took it out of the Commonwealth, but of course, Adam Barrow came into power, and of course, Gambia was readmitted. Countries like Zimbabwe as well, now they are seeking to be readmitted. So the membership is purely voluntary, and there's quite a lot in terms of the commonalities, in terms of the issues around the games at some point where the Commonwealth countries will have the games. So it's an all-encompassing environment where they do quite a lot in terms of strengthening their political environment. If there are concerns, you know, they come together and try to find solutions.
Is there still an almost paternalistic influence that Buckingham Palace has on the Commonwealth?
Well, very much so, Peter, especially because these are very interesting times as Queen Elizabeth really is reaching the twilight. So when you go back to the last gathering in London in 2018, she delegated Prince Charles most of these responsibilities to look after the Commonwealth countries. But it's really interesting how some of the Commonwealth nations have been vociferous and coming out and saying, look, some of us really don't want to see you as a head of state anymore. You look at what's happened in Barbados, you look at what may potentially happen in Jamaica, and their Prime Minister has also landed in Kigali, but also just the diversity of these countries, the likes of Canada, where the Queen is still the head of state, the Prime Minister, in fact, just landed a short while ago, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So it's really interesting how they work together, notwithstanding their differences. You know, you have the smallest countries, smallest islands, where you have a 12,000 population. They're part of the Commonwealth.
So is it a social club, or do things really get decided and that people say, okay, as a Commonwealth, this is our position and this is what we're going to do? They're looking at terrorism, they're looking at climate change. Is something concrete going to come out of this gathering, do you think? Or is it a social club?
Well, I think to some degree it does come across as more a social club, especially because, you know, there's always a hype in the run-up to these gatherings, and thereafter everything just kind of dies down a little. But I think that's one of the weaknesses of such bureaucratic organizations, where a lot is being said, but in terms of the implementation, in terms of the communique, once it comes out on Saturday, once they meet again, what's going to happen in terms of the progress? I think that's always a very big challenge for such organizations. But of course, this is such a very good opportunity for a country like Rwanda to showcase its abilities, as much as Rwandan critics have really been talking about what is happening in the Great Lakes with the whole M23 situation, the accusations, counter-accusations from the DRC, where Kigali has been vehemently denying to support M23, especially because when you talk about Commonwealth, the issue of human rights is really at the center. So the critics of Rwanda, they do talk about some not really good picture, as it were, when it comes to their host.
And I suppose the tricky one is going to be Prince Charles. He has spoken behind the scenes, and the unhappiness that he has with his government, with this Rwanda and UK government partnership in getting these exiles that arrive in the UK sent to Rwanda, and that the British government is paying for this. So there are a lot of people not happy with the UK outsourcing its responsibilities. And now we have the head of the Commonwealth who's representing the Queen, who has also said he's unhappy with his own government. How are they going to navigate this, or it might not even be brought up?
I think it's going to be a very tough one, Peter. Definitely behind the scenes, when President Kagame would have those private talks with Prince Charles, it's likely to be one of the issues that they'll discuss, but certainly not in public, because Prince Charles has been very careful not to really say much, because according to the information that we saw, the word that he used to describe this particular pact between Rwanda and, of course, the UK, he said it's appalling. Of course, it remains something that was said in privacy, as it were, but most definitely, behind the scenes, this is something that the two leaders will look at, especially because this is something that the UK really has been really lambasted in so many quarters. You do have so many lobby groups saying that, of course, the UK is running away from its own international obligation and it's not a sustainable move, but also others. Once again, talk about the human rights record of Rwanda. As much as we do know that this is a country that has been really tried so hard to position itself as a hub of ICT, as a hub of technology, really moving from a very devastating past. But something that is going to be really interesting, Peter, will be around the position of the Secretary General of the Commonwealth. We do know that the British national, Patricia Scotland, is a current occupant. So at the end of the summit, the leaders will have to look at this position, as much as, of course, what we understand is that Miss Scotland really is likely to be retained in this particular position.
All right. Should we read anything into the fact that Dr. Pandor is representing South Africa and not the head of state?
It's quite interesting, Peter, because we do know that between Kigali and Pretoria, I mean, we've seen for the longest time how they've tried to thaw these frosty diplomatic relations because of what has happened between the two capitals. But of course, the president has been quite smart in saying that, look, the president's diary is full, there's so much domestically, the reports that he just got, the BRICS, the ANC conference in the economic hub. So there's so much really that he needs to navigate domestically. At least that has been the position.
Yeah, but CHOGM is not small, is it?
Of course. It's a very big platform, especially because you're talking about also economic recovery in terms of the partnerships that must be forged by these countries.
All right. Khayelihle Khumalo, thanks very much indeed for keeping your eye on all the countries around the world for us. Thanks so much for coming through. All right, so Khayelihle Khumalo, who's giving us his thoughts ahead of the CHOGM meeting taking place in Kigali. The first time that we're coming together in about 3 years now. The Queen couldn't make it this time. She has mobility issues and she's in her 90s, so she's seen a lot of the